Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, we start with the Liberal Democrats, and it's fair to say that talk of a Lib Dem surge sweeping the country has stalled, with the party getting squeezed in what's looking like an old-fashioned two-party election. Well, Tim Farron joins us now live from his constituency in Kendal. Hello, thanks for being with us, Mr. Farron.
Morning, Sophie.
You seem quite cheery this morning, considering the polls. You're kind of languishing in single figures. It looks like the Lib Dem fight back is at risk of turning into the Lib Dem flop. What's gone wrong?
Well, polls have been up and they've been down, and this weekend they're back up again. But we've got 2.5 weeks to go. Theresa May called the general election to suit the Conservative Party because she expects a colossal landslide. Labour, if you look at Labour's own polls themselves being discussed this weekend, are expecting to lose 90 seats. And that means at the moment, Britain is heading for Theresa May on the 9th of June, having a bigger majority than the ones that Margaret Thatcher enjoyed in the 1980s. And people need to imagine, and I hope they will just at this moment imagine what it will mean for their communities, for themselves, for their families, if Theresa May gets that huge majority. And the Liberal Democrats are the only party who can plausibly gain any seats off the Conservatives at all in this election. And that absolutely stacks up. If Labour are going to lose up to 100 seats, the SNP like to go backwards, who is there who will threaten the Conservatives? And we could all reel off seats where the Liberal Democrats have a great chance of gaining from the Conservatives. And if you want to prevent that nightmare of a huge Theresa May landslide, and what that means in terms of dementia tax, in terms of the loss of free school meals, when it means coming out of the single market and making us all poorer, if you want to avert that and change the course of Britain's future, then the Liberal Democrats are the one party standing in the place for you.
That's a remarkably optimistic way of looking at it, though, isn't it? Realistically, saying that the Lib Dems are the only party who can take seats of the Conservatives. I mean, if the polls are to be believed this week, Labour have been closing the gap.
But then, if you look at the polls, you'll see, seat by seat, Labour's own discussion sites are talking about Labour losing upwards of 90 seats. The SNP, unless Nicola Sturgeon is going to surprise us with an aggressive foreign policy and start standing in England, the SNP could only gain 1 seat, and all the evidence is that they will go backwards. Ergo, the only party with any chance of gaining seats off the Conservatives are the Liberal Democrats, and I'm sure that we're going to do that. But this next 2.5 weeks is where it all changes. This is where the British people, all of you, have the chance to change choose a different future for Britain. Because what we're seeing this weekend with the Conservatives under increasing pressure because they've chosen a dementia tax. If you or your loved one has or will get dementia, they are coming for you. And that tells you 2 things. First of all, it tells you a little bit about the character of those at the top of the Conservative Party: mean, calculating, uncaring. It also tells you that the Conservatives think they have this in the bag, that a colossal Margaret Thatcher scale landslide is coming, and they can take you all for granted. And given the Liberal Democrats are the only party who can gain seats from the Conservatives, this is your opportunity to make sure the Conservatives do not take you for granted. If you fear the dementia tax, and I do, for me, for my family, for everybody in our communities around the country, if you fear it, you've got 2.5 weeks to do something about it, and don't let Theresa May take you for granted.
You say that the Lib Dems are the only party that can take seats off the Conservatives, but at the same time, that's quite a remarkably interesting spin to put on the fact that before this election you only had 9 MPs. I mean, that's the real reason, isn't it, that you're the only ones who can take seats off the Conservatives, because you're starting from such a low base.
Well, you're conceding that that's true, and you're right. I mean, the Liberal Democrats.
No, I'm trying to explain why the argument.
One hopes
you're making the argument that you are.
We all know, don't we, that in large parts of the United Kingdom, Liberal Democrats are the only serious challengers to the Conservatives. And if we're looking at what the House of Commons might look like after the general election, how free Theresa May might feel, and indeed how emboldened she might be to increase or to bring in the dementia tax, for example, and do these damaging things to the poorest people in our society and the most vulnerable people in our society, then the only way you can see the Conservative numbers being at all pegged back is through the Liberal Democrats. And that's becoming increasingly apparent. But in the end, this is an election where we get to choose what kind of country we are. Are we going to be the kind of country that accepts Theresa May's choice of an extreme version of Brexit, which will make us poorer and less powerful in the world and will affect our children's future? And given that Labour and UKIP voted along with Theresa May to choose that bleak destiny, that gives the Liberal Democrats that clear and stark position where we say to the British people, we trust you with the final outcome on the deal. We will give you the opportunity to either accept that deal if you want, or to say no thanks, we will remain. And this is an epoch-making election. You know, in 3 weeks, it will be too late. This is the last chance saloon. If you're bothered about our country shrinking to become meaner, nastier and poorer, then you need to do something about it. And given that Jeremy Corbyn's Labour basically held Theresa May's hand as we jumped off that extreme Brexit cliff edge earlier this year, the Liberal Democrats are the one party offering you hope. And I'm optimistic the British people are in the mood for a bit of hope.
Let's talk about Brexit, shall we? Because this is clearly a big part of your campaign. But according to surveys, the majority of people don't want to see the results overturned. They don't want to rerun the referendum again. And yet that is effectively what you're offering with this idea of a referendum on the deal where to remain in the EU is an option on the ballot paper. You put your eggs in the wrong basket here.
Well, no, let's look at the electoral maths, if you like. I mean, 1 in 3 voters supports the Liberal Democrat position calling for a referendum on the deal. And one of the reasons Theresa May has called this election now is before there is any detail out there for people to get concerned about. Once the issues of a Brexit move from the emotional to the practical, I'm quite convinced over the next 2 years the Liberal Democrats will be proved, without a shadow of a doubt, absolutely right. But as things stand, whichever side of the divide you were on last June, forget that, that's done. Brexit was voted for and that's the direction the country's travelling in. But the question is, who should have the final say on the deal? And it's going to be one of 2 kinds of people. Either it will be the politicians or it'll be the people. Now, Theresa May, Jeremy Corbyn, Paul Nuttall think the politicians should stitch it up. And the Liberal Democrats stand alone, saying it should be the people. Increasingly, as I knock on doors and talk to people around the country, people who voted Leave are beginning to see that the only fair and democratic way to end this process is for the people to have the final say, rather than us and our children for generations to come having to live with a stitched-up deal between Brussels and London that none of us had any say over.
Now, you've clearly decided to take your party down this route on Brexit, on the EU referendum. If it goes wrong, if you fail to increase the number of MPs that you had before the election, would you resign as leader?
Well, of course, I take responsibility. I am the leader of the party, but this is not about making a tactical calculation, Sophie. This is about me. I think many people like me around the country thinking that, when my children are my age, I want to be able to look them in the eye and say I did absolutely everything to fight for their future. And I don't just mean making sure that the people have the final say on the deal, having the option to remain if that is what the people choose. But it's also about not being a bleak, narrow, restricted country when it comes to cutting national health and social care. I am proud that the Liberal Democrats, the only party, being honest with the British people and saying, look, health and social care is in crisis, so we will put a penny on income tax, we'll be straight with you, to raise the money needed to make our health and social care systems the best in the world. You contrast that with the nastiness of Theresa May's dementia tax, which will become Theresa May's version of the poll tax, and my prediction is it will bring her down, because to show such callousness to people in desperate need and their families at a time like this, out of maybe the meanness of the Conservatives' character, but also the calculating nature of their position, thinking they've already won the general election so they can get away with this kind of stuff. So I am very proud that we offer the British people a very clear difference, belief in a country that is different to the one that Theresa May envisages, that's outward looking, a country where we're decent to one another. That is the kind of country I want to build, I want to lead, one in which our children grow up in a country where we are decent to one another. And I think that's a strong position for us to be in, and it's where I think in the next 2.5 weeks the Liberal Democrats will continue to grow.
Well, it's very clear that you want to talk about Theresa May as much as you possibly can. I'm keen to talk about other issues as well, about your own personal views, your personal character. You're leading this party. Fox hunting, for example. In 2009, you said that you would vote to repeal the ban on fox hunting. So if Theresa May, as she says she will, calls a free vote on fox hunting, how are you going to vote? Are you going to vote to overturn the ban?
So I've never said I would repeal the Fox Hunting Act. What I've said was that first of all, I think the decision of Theresa May to go down the line of of repealing it when there is so many other massive issues on the table, health, social care, education, seems a complete distraction and a complete failure to understand what that issue did to divide very many rural communities. It's an unfortunate thing for us to have chosen to have done. For what it's worth, I think the Act could have been improved and it could be replaced with one which protected livestock as well as wildlife. But I think Theresa May's choice of raising this issue shows that her priorities are wrong.
I'm just going to read the quote from September 2009 that you gave. I would vote to repeal the ban. My personal view is that it hasn't worked, and I would vote to repeal it and replace it with broader animal welfare and licensing safeguards. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's exactly the point I was making. So at the time, I think, and I still now think, that you could replace it and improve it.
Well, you just said that you said that you would.
Theresa May. What?
You said you wouldn't vote to repeal it, but then
you very kindly and fairly, at the second attempt, read out the full quote, which is right. Because to just repeal it and leave it alone would be callous and would be wrong, would be utterly divisive. There's no reason why one shouldn't go back to the Act to try and improve it and protect livestock. That's all I said.
You did say that you would allow hunting with dogs, though. Is that still what you think?
Well, that's already the case, isn't it? In that dogs are allowed to be used to flush out foxes to guns. I think what Theresa May has failed to understand, though, is how divisive this issue is in rural areas. And as someone who believes passionately in animal welfare, I think the Act could always be improved to make sure that you protect not just wildlife, foxes and others, but you also protect farm livestock. But I think Theresa May's choice of this issue and bringing it up in the issue shows a complete failure of judgment and poor priorities. So at the time when we need to tackle the enormous problems in our schools, we're facing the loss of £3 billion of funding for our schools in the next 3 years. 2 in 3 schools will sack a teacher in the next 8 weeks because Theresa May's underfunding of our schools, and she wants to bang on about fox hunting. It just seems complete madness.
Now this week as well, earlier this week, an interview that you gave in 2007 on abortion has resurfaced as well, in which you say abortion is wrong. Society has to climb down from the position that says there's nothing objectionable about abortion before a certain time. If abortion is wrong, it's wrong at any time. This is your chance to make your own personal views clear on this. Do you think abortion is wrong?
So back then, I believed that there should be access to abortion legally. I believe in people being able to choose. I believed that then, and I believe that now.
But it's not quite what I'm asking, because I understand, that you say that people should have the access to abortion, but many women in this country, up to 1 in 3 women, is what some people say. Up to 1 in 3 women in this country have had an abortion, and so I think many will want to know if you think that they've done something that's wrong. Do you?
So I've answered your question. I believe in choice, that women should have access to abortion that is legal and is safe, and that my motives in all this are all about compassion towards these women, and to say, as I did 10 years ago, that I believe women should be able to make that choice under law, that abortion should be safe and legal, and that our votes on, for example, the time limits should be under the guidance of what the science says. I believe that then, and I believe that now.
I'm still just a little bit unclear about whether you think it's wrong.
Well, I believe that women should have access under law, which is safe and legal. And I think that that's the critical issue. Do you believe that people should be able to make that choice under law? And do you believe that the law as it stands is right, and the science that dictates or underlines that law is right? I do believe that. I did then and I do now.
And I understand why you're saying that the important issue is about whether people have access to safe abortion. But for many people, it's also a question of moral judgment. You're asking people to elect your MPs with you as head of the party. People want to know what you think about things.
So, do you know what? The measure of a Liberal is someone who protects other people's rights, no matter what your personal position is. And I think that is fundamental. And I think the odd kind of focus upon my faith over this last few weeks is one that I think millions of people would just think is very peculiar. That I'm one of millions of people in this country who have a faith. Some Christian, some not Christian. and the majority probably with no faith whatsoever. My job is to fight for the rights of all of those people, and indeed, you know, to make sure that when we are looking at the future of our children, what are we going to do to, for example, invest in our schools? When you've got 2 in 3 schools about to lose a teacher, when we see a social care crisis, a health crisis, Tories bringing in the dementia tax, the choice of this extreme version of Brexit, I think people think it's bizarre that journalists and others spend their time banging on about someone's faith.
I'm not, with respect, banging on about your faith. I'm just asking you a very straight question about whether you think abortion's wrong.
Yeah, you are, Sophie. You are, Sophie, and I've answered it, which is a liberal. I protect people's and defend people's rights to make those choices. I believe abortion should be safe and legally accessible. That's what I believed then, is what I believe now. Let's talk about things that are going to affect our children's future now. We are in the position where Theresa May is heading for a colossal majority, where Jeremy Corbyn is the least electable official opposition leader in living memory. The dementia tax will be a reality in weeks' time. The sacking of teachers will be a reality in a few weeks' time. The narrowing of our children's horizons by the choice of an extreme version of Brexit, chosen by Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn, will be a reality in a few weeks' time. And it's time we focused on those issues, because I want the Liberal Democrats to be the party that offers people, not just young people, but especially young people, real hope that the future for our country can be better and brighter than it's currently going to be.
OK, loud and clear, Tim Farron. Final question for you. Donald Trump is on his first foreign trip as President of the United States. He's chosen to go to Saudi Arabia. What do you make of his choice?
Well, I think it's an interesting choice that Donald Trump's engagement with the outside world is obviously about selling weapons. And what I want is a country, our country, to be one which is outward looking and makes friends with its neighbours and joins with people who share our values. And it's what troubles me, I guess, about Britain's foreign policy. I can affect that, I can't affect America's. We should, of course, be working with the United States, but that does not mean that we should be signing up to their values. And I think the sadness of Theresa May's choices this last few months is she's turned her backs on the people in the rest of this continent who broadly share our values, democratic, outward-looking, caring, and is indeed aligning herself to the kind of Farage-backed Trump approach to the world, which is insular, nationalist, and really only interested in other countries if you can sell weapons to them. That's not the kind of Britain I want to raise my kids in, and I think it's the kind of Britain we need to reject and move on from on the 8th of June.
Tim Farron, thank you very much for your time today.
I've been getting away with it all